Versatile Mage. Chapter 316. Just in time, Zan Kong. Crap. A pack of tyrant lizards are heading toward us. A soldier who was in charge of observing the surroundings blurted out. The giant lizards would never be able to break through the defense. After all, they were battle mages who had gone through countless battles. They knew how to exploit the weaknesses of the demon beasts to set up a temporary fortress. However, the tyrant lizards were a completely different story. Each tyrant lizard that had appeared would inflict some damage to their formation. They would need a couple of intermediate spells to hold them off. However, a pack of tyrant lizards was definitely a nightmare for them. They were all trying to hold the overwhelming number of giant lizards back. Who would have the spare firepower to deal with the tyrant lizards? Seeing the pack of tyrant lizards taking up half of the street, with the different colored skins indicating the element they possessed, the soldiers could no longer remain calm as before. Death was just around the corner. Clear a path, now. Jiang Yi demanded. They had to break free from the demon beasts. Otherwise, their entire troop would be wiped out here. Meanwhile, Mo Fan had used the fleeing shadow to distance himself from the main street. He was still at the center of Jinlan City, but for some reason, the buildings nearby had all collapsed. The whole place was full of debris. He could not see the end of it with a glance. There was no swamp nearby. Although he could still see the towering nest in the distance, there were barely any giant lizards nearby. Mo Fan stood on the remains of an observation tower and looked at the soldiers who were slowly drowning among the demon beasts. He could imagine the fear replacing their arrogant looks. He could also imagine the disbelief on Jiang Yi's face when she lost sight of him. This bunch of idiots, still thinking they stood a chance against him. They would never expect him to be a shadow magician, too. He could easily move around as long as there were shadows near him. The giant lizards were extremely slow with their reactions. They would never notice him when he was using their shadows to move around. It was the main reason why Mo Fan had decided to venture deep into their territory. Most importantly, he had managed to rank up. Mo Fan now understood why many of their seniors had encouraged the younger magicians to have more battles against the demon beasts. Meditating was indeed important, but the best way to improve a human's potential was through fighting. If he weren't surrounded by the demon beasts, Mo Fan believed that he would have needed at least another half a year to improve his fire nebula to the 3rd tier. Fiery Fist, 9 halls. I've finally mastered such a domineering attack. Mo Fan clenched his right fist as he recalled the destruction wrought by the giant fire pillars. He still remembered his first time seeing the attack from Tang Yu. Back then, Tang Yu was so powerful that Mo Fan had the urge to bow before her. She might have reached a greater height by now, but at least he had caught up to her strength back then. Besides, she was an agent of the magic courts. Leaning back, Mo Fan began to take a rest. He was slightly worn out from the battle before. Now that he was safe, he was not in a rush to leave, since he was interested in admiring the fate of the evil battle mages when they ended up dead. What's that? Mo Fan realized a pair of white wings were flapping in the sky. He gathered his thoughts and glanced ahead, taking a clearer look. The following second, his body began to tremble as if he had been struck by lightning. It was a heavenly eagle with a pair of snowy white wings, slightly bigger than an ordinary one. It was flapping its wings as it soared across the sky above Jinlan City. Its claws were extremely huge and were carrying a giant net. 4 people were trapped inside the net. It looked like they had lost control of their minds. They were utterly helpless against the net and were being dragged around like little chicks. Their eyes were looking at their surroundings helplessly. Mo Fan was utterly familiar with them, as they were Zhao Manting, Mu Nujiao, Mu Ningzhu, and Bai Tingting. Flames of anger ignited within Mo Fan's heart. He finally realized why Lu Nian was not going after him. It turned out that the devil was chasing after his friends. He was hanging them in the air just to display his bargaining chips. Mo Fan was exceedingly furious. How could someone be so despicable? If he could turn his anger into fire around his fist, he would surely have smashed that son of a bitch's face with his bare hands. Mo Fan, I'll only say this once, whether you can hear it or not. Come and kneel in front of me at once. Otherwise, I'll be throwing 'em down from this height. Don't you worry, I've sealed their souls. I can guarantee you that they won't be able to cast a single spell during the fall. According to my experience, even a warrior-level demon beast will be smashed into minced meat from this height. Forget about the little kid from the Zhao family who's on the verge of dying after I've beaten the crap out of him. However, it would be a pity for the girl with the ice element who's still unconscious. I believe she's very important to you. If that's not good enough, how about the three of them together? Lu Nian's devil-like voice echoed in the sky. He had purposely enhanced his voice with his magic, making sure that it would spread to every corner of the city. As Mo Fan heard the words, flames uncontrollably burst out under his feet. He could no longer control the rage inside him. Even the outrageous Black Vatican had never made him so angry before. He never thought it would be a person wearing the uniform of a battle mage. Mo Fan, this devil will still kill us even after you've shown yourself. Go back to the capital, to the Magic City. You have to let the Enforcement Union and the army know what happened here. Zhao Manting, who was severely injured, let out a scream. He was unable to yell out with magic, as his soul was being sealed. He could only scream at the top of his voice, hoping Mo Fan could hear him somewhere down there. That being said, there was no chance Mo Fan could hear him due to the height. Bai Tingting and Mu Nujiao remained silent. Their ears were filled with the echoes of Lu Nian's terrible laughter. Up in the sky, a great burst of wind swept forward, parting the clouds in a blue line. A pair of wind wings slowly appeared in the blue sky, as a man wearing a wind jacket embroidered with a different pattern on its back flew toward the city rapidly. The man had a handsome, stubbled face. Although his collars were upright, an obvious scar going across his neck all the way to his chest could still be seen. Lu Nian, you've committed a terrible crime. Let go of the students at once. The man approached the giant heavenly eagle and snapped furiously. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 317. Constellation, Advanced Magic. Lu Nian stood on the back of the heavenly eagle and stared at the stubbled man driving the wind wings. Zan Kong. Isn't he the guy in charge of the army in the south? Why would he come all the way to Dongting Lake to meddle with his business? The entire operation had been carried out behind the scenes. There was no way the military would have noticed it. Could it be that someone had alerted them? Could it be the students who had escaped? Impossible. Even if they had some sort of communication device, the military would not be able to respond so quickly. It was too much of a coincidence if Zan Kong just happened to be nearby, too. Lu Nian grinned, revealing his yellow teeth. He waved his pipe calmly before speaking with a challenging gaze. A useless commander like you, who failed to protect Bo City, dares to challenge me. Zan Kong, I believe you've come alone. You knew that the kid had double innate elements all along, but you have been keeping it to yourself. Does that mean you're planning something on your own, too? Bullshit. Do you think everyone is as reckless as you? Blood Sarira my ass. With the kid's potential, he could easily rise up as a hero one day without relying on that filthy piece of crap. I'd feel greatly ashamed if I were you, to use such inhumane methods on students. If your father knew you would turn out to be such a piece of crap, he would prefer to shoot you on the wall and let you dry in the wind. Zan Kong did not care how rough it sounded when he was cursing people. He was extremely furious. Zan Kong assumed that Lu Nian would only be trying to capture Mo Fan alive. To his surprise, Lu Nian had totally lost his mind. He somehow decided to kill all the students, just to silence them. They were the elite students from the Imperial College and the Pearl Institute, with a great future ahead of them. However, they had died horrible deaths here just because of Lu Nian's wild ambition. How many years had it been since the military had a failure like him? Zan Kong, do you really think you can defeat me? Lu Nian smiled. It slowly turned into a savage grin. Since his actions had been exposed, there was no longer a need to be mindful of keeping it all a secret. There was no need to care too much. A high achiever should never be bound to the restrictions around him. It was better now that he was no longer tied to his rank. There were only a few commanders in the army that could match his strength, and this Lu Nian was definitely on the list. It was time for the massacre to begin. Anyone who was slightly related to this incident would die. Feed 'em to that thing. Lu Nian glanced at the giant beast who had just woken up on top of the nest with a cruel grin. Commander, I believe that's a razor-tailed drake. The soldier driving the heavenly eagle said with a trembling voice. Lu Nian was referring to the dominator of the desolated city, currently sitting at the top of the giant lizard's nest, the razor-tailed drake. Feeding the 4 students to the razor-tailed drake. Wasn't that a little bit too far? If he were to fly toward it, the razor-tailed drake would surely eat both him and the heavenly eagle too. Are you disobeying my order? Lu Nian glared at the soldier. Negative. The soldier saluted and directed the heavenly eagle to fly toward the nest. In the net, Bai Tingting's face was as pale as a piece of paper. Zhao Manting and Mu Nujiao might not know the beast, but she had seen it herself. The heavenly eagle was flying directly at the beast. Despite the distance between them, Bai Tingting was already soaked with cold sweat from fear. What's that? Zhao Manting caught onto the net and stared at the top of the nest. With a blank face. It's the thing that had eaten the pseudomorphing demon beast with a single bite, Bai Tingting said in a trembling voice. Zhao Manting and Mu Nujiao could not help but shiver in fear. So, that's the thing. Eating the pseudomorphing demon beast with a single bite. The pseudomorphing demon beast alone was impossible to deal with. Wouldn't that make the razor-tailed drake as deadly as the Grim Reaper? They preferred to fall to their deaths from the current height rather than being fed to the razor-tailed drake as a snack. Lu Nian, are you insane? Are you seriously going to continue making mistakes? Zan Kong roared furiously. Zan Kong, are you really that naive to believe the world is within your grasp? Don't you know that someone is still waiting for you under the cracks of Tianshan Mountain? You don't even have the courage to retrieve her corpse. Lu Nian burst into sinister laughter. Lu Nian's words made Zan Kong's expression turn extremely dark, as if they had touched a spike at the bottom of his heart that he had been avoiding all this time. His eyes flickered with a strong murderous intent. The devil commander seemed to enjoy Zan Kong's reaction and added with a laugh, you couldn't even protect Bo City from a bunch of low-intelligence demon wolves. You've shown me again just how useless you are. I feel sorry for you. Zan Kong's muscles twitched. The scar under his collar almost burst open as it throbbed. And now you're back pretending to be a hero, trying to condemn us like a sacred judge. Don't you find it funny? Look at those students. How innocent, how pitiful. They might be the future of mankind if they were able to survive. If you really are capable, then try and get over my dead body and save them. Prove to me that you're not a useless piece of crap. Unfortunately, you're trash. A complete piece of trash. Lu Nian's voice was extremely ear-piercing. Despite being utterly furious, there was no expression on his face. Zan Kong wore an expressionless face. He pointed at Lu Nian and said in a firm tone, I might have failed before, but I've never stopped trying. That person who was frozen under the cracks of Tianshan Mountain. Even if his hair turned white by the time he became a super magician, he would still revisit Tianshan Mountain to retrieve her, either alive or dead. It was a promise that he would keep for the rest of his life. He knew he was responsible for Bo City's calamity, too. The Darkwing Wolf, the Black Vatican, he would never forgive them. He would surely use the wolf's blood and the heads of the Black Vatican to mourn the deceased of Bo City. Now, Zan Kong had sworn to himself that he would slay Lu Nian to get rid of this disgrace of the military, even if his life were at stake. His wind wings beat rapidly. His priority now was to save the 4 students who were being delivered to the razor-tailed drake. Zan Kong swept across the sky at his fastest speed, resulting in a trail of turbulence behind him. Eyes of the rock demon. Lu Nian would never let Zan Kong pass so easily. Several brilliant stars appeared close to him, which were densely joined together in the sky like a stunning nebula. The stars aligned into patterns. The patterns glowed brightly while they slowly combined. They gradually merged into an astonishing constellation near Lu Nian's position. The brown-hued constellation looked incredibly complex, but Lu Nian had constructed it in a very adept manner. The evil commander was casting an advanced earth spell. The brilliant, astounding constellation was enough to serve as an indication. Petrify, the evil commander uttered coldly. The clouds in the sky were covered in a grayish-white layer. The dust from the petrification process lingered in the air. The clouds were turned into a stony substance within a few seconds, which began to break into pieces while floating in the air. Even the clouds were petrified. What about humans? Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 318. This is the Blood Sarira. The first time Mo Fan had met Zan Kong, his wind wings had only consisted of a pair, resembling an ordinary pair of wings. Currently, Zan Kong had 2 pairs of wind wings on his back. The wings were generating a strong gust between them, which was quite impossible to see without a closer look. Zan Kong was controlling the 4 wind wings mentally. A pair of them wrapped in front of him as a shield, forming a layer of protection around him. The gray-white force of Petrify approached its target. However, the wind element circulating around the wings was effective against the particles, even those invisible to the naked eye. It formed a layer of protection that could blow any energy away. Protected by the wind wings, Zan Kong's eyes were burning. Wind was only his supportive element. Fire was his main element. Facing a strong opponent like Lu Nian, Zan Kong had no intentions of concealing his strength. Fiery stars quickly aligned around his body. The paths between the stars lined up and drew a perfect intermediate star pattern. The star patterns continued to join together as Zan Kong floated right in the middle of them. He was like a dictator who had control over the lives of all living things, able to bring utter destruction with a single rise of his hand. The constellation took form. As the advanced magic was being cast, Zan Kong maintained his altitude while holding his hands above him. A fiery magic ring sprang up high in the sky. The fiery magic ring covered a huge area above the clouds. It dyed the sky the color of sunset, resulting in a spectacular view. Sky Flame Funeral. Zan Kong, who was right in the middle of the fire constellation, glanced down at Lu Nian. His hands were actually supporting the fiery magic ring that had set the entire sky ablaze. Following his roar, giant fireballs swept across the sky like a meteor shower and dove down. The sky above the city turned blazing red. The meteor shower was visually astonishing. It was definitely worthy to be called a funeral, since each of the fireballs was enough to stir up utter destruction, smashing a huge chunk of the city into ashes. Although the Sky Flame Funeral was targeting the evil commander Lu Nian, the packs of giant lizards on the ground ended up as victims, too. Countless numbers of them were burned into ashes as the flames poured down upon the place. When the destructive force reached a certain level, the servant-class demon beasts became extremely tiny. The spreading force from the Sky Flame Funeral was enough to annihilate the giant lizards from an entire street. Mo Fan was not in the mood to spectate the duel between Lu Nian and Zan Kong. He raised his head while chasing after the heavenly eagle on the way to the nest. Zan Kong was occupied with the battle against Lu Nian. There was no way he could save the students in time. Mo Fan was torn with anxiety as he saw Zhao Manting, Mu Nujiao, Bai Tingting, and Mu Ningzhu approaching the gates of hell. What now? What could he do to save them? The place ahead was an ocean of giant lizards. He had no idea if he could make his way through them. Besides, for God's sake, the razor-tailed drake was awake. At the top of the nest, a giant pair of wings slowly extended, like a human stretching after waking up from a nap. Its giant eyes slowly opened as it exhaled a deep breath, splitting the clouds in front of it apart. It slowly turned its head around. It first looked down at its citizens, to check if they were sticking to the daily routine. However, it suddenly caught a glimpse of something moving ahead. The giant lizards were not sensitive to things that were stationary. However, they naturally had a grudge against those that flew in the sky. The giant beast stared at the heavenly eagle approaching it, its eyes fixed on the humans hanging in the net. It stuck out its tongue with an avid gaze, and a hint of anger directed at the imbeciles that had dared to trespass into its territory. On the ground, Mo Fan was getting closer to the giant lizard's territory. Mo Fan had no fear of the overwhelming number of giant lizards. He would not mind stacking the dead corpses into a mountain. Unfortunately, the razor-tail drake had awoken. The commander-level demon beast, which had been able to kill the pseudomorphing demon beast with a single bite, had set its eyes on Muningzu and the others. "You're going to kill yourself." As Mo Fan stopped for a brief moment to catch his breath, a woman's voice appeared from the debris beside him. Mo Fan glanced toward it and saw advisor Jiang Yi. The woman was indeed quite impressive, being able to escape from the tide of giant lizards in one piece. That being said, half of her troop was missing. Even Jiang Yi herself was covered in wounds. It was clear that they had completely lost their ability to fight. "If you were planning to stop me, I'll kill you all right away." Mo Fan glared at the remnants of the troop. He had no time to waste on them. Either way, there was no way he would watch Muningzu die. Let's ignore the fact that you can't make your way past the swarm of giant lizards in front of you. Even if you somehow made it to the razor-tail drake, it would smash you into minced meat with a single slap. "You're just getting yourself killed." Jiang Yi uttered a piece of cold advice instead of trying to detain him. "As if I'm not aware of it. If it weren't for you lunatics, why would it have ended up like this?" Mo Fan cursed. He was using his blood tabby to chase the heavenly eagle across half of the city. It was currently on cooldown. How could he possibly weave through the giant lizards which had totally filled up the 2-kilometer-long street? Even if he somehow made it to the other side, how could he possibly face the razor-tail drake? Zan Kong was occupied with the battle against Lu Nian. There was no way he could make it in time, while Lu Nian was purposely dragging the battle further just to let Mo Fan know the consequences of not following his demands. The commander is out of his mind. Jiang Yi's eyes were filled with despair. Jiang Yi could barely justify the commander's decision from before, and now, what he was doing had completely surpassed her final limit. Their commander Lu Nian had really changed. He had gone insane. He was no longer doing it just to complete the invention of the new element. He was trying to satisfy his lust to kill. As a matter of fact, she should have realized it as soon as she set out for the operation. "I believe you understand too. There's no way they could survive the razor-tail drake. Even if Zan Kong managed to make his way past Lu Nian, he won't be able to save them, either," Jiang Yi added. Mo Fan's actions were utterly meaningless. He could not even make his way through the street filled with giant lizards, and still, he was thinking of saving the 4 students. "Shut the fuck up," Mo Fan snapped. Fire began to sprout from his body uncontrollably, followed by a few lightning arcs flickering in the air. It was a sign that a magician had totally lost control of his emotions. Jiang Yi could tell that this young magician was reluctant to give up until the final moment. He was still planning to rush into the territory of the giant lizards. "Are they really that important to you?" Jiang Yi asked. Mo Fan did not respond. He did not even consider the question. His only thought was to eliminate the giant lizards so he could reach the nest. He wanted to knock the razor-tail drake flying with his fist. No one was allowed to touch the people inside the net. "Mo Fan, if you really want to save them." Jiang Yi's eyes flickered with strong emotion as if she had made a decision that she could not even believe herself. She opened her palm and continued. "Here is the blood Sarira." Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 319. New Element, Demon. A crazy woman whose mind is filled with thoughts of killing people like you should just stay as far away from me as possible. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind killing you all right now. Mo Fan had had enough of Jiang Yi's bullshit. He had to calmly think of a way to make his way to the nest while the razortail drake was still drowsy after waking up from a long nap. This is the only way, if you really want to save them, Jiang Yi said calmly. On her filthy hand floated a bright red container, which looked like a drop of liquid. It was impossible to tell what element it consisted of from its eerie gloss. However, Jiang Yi could easily sense the overwhelming power it contained. Magic associations across the 5 continents were unwilling to admit its existence, to the extent that the governing body of every nation had forbidden its experimentation. Maybe it was evil and wild, but no one had denied its unmatched power. It was always the case when a new element was invented. The whole world would always be against it at the start. Humans were always afraid of the unknown and had deemed it evil. However, how could power be deemed righteous or evil? Just because it was too overwhelming. If someone were able to fully control it, it would be up to the person to decide if it were truly evil. Double innate elements. The young man who possessed 3 elements at the intermediate level. He was fearless and intelligent. Jiang Yi had never met any magician who would dare to trigger a breakthrough while surrounded by demon beasts. Jiang Yi believed that he was the only person who could control the new element. Maybe it's our fault that all this is happening. We're willing to accept our fate, but that's because of the sins that we have committed. You and your friends shouldn't be treated as a sacrifice. It's a very simple decision. Either you charge into the demon beasts and die like an idiot, or break this blood Sarira into pieces. Well, you could just turn around and leave instead. Maybe the people inside the net aren't that important to you, after all. Jiang Yi held her palm up, allowing Mo Fan to take a closer look at the blood Sarira. Turn around and leave. Mo Fan glanced at the heavenly eagle, which was getting closer to the razortail drake. If Mo Jiaxin were in the net, Mo Fan would not hesitate. If Xingxia were in the net, Mo Fan would not hesitate either. How about them? Even if he were able to calm himself, the urge to save them was definitely stronger than any fear of going against the giant lizards. It was actually not so complicated. The same thought had been occupying his mind all along. No one was allowed to touch them, not the devil Lunian, nor the razortail drake. Finally, Mo Fan said to Jiang Yi, "Give that piece of shit to me. We call it the demon, or you can call it the demon element, too. It's still considered black magic." Jiang Yi handed the container to Mo Fan. Mo Fan had no time to waste with Jiang Yi. He couldn't care less about the specific procedures, nor did he care what it was called. The blood Sarira looked like a drop of blood that had been frozen in midair. However, it felt like it was made of glass. He could easily break it into pieces with his fingertips. You have 3 nebulas due to your double innate elements. You should be able to provide sufficient energy to the blood Sarira. You also possess the summoning element. According to the information we collected from our 788th test subject, you will be affected by your summoned beast's lineage once you transform. Therefore, your transformation will lean towards something related to the lineage of wolf species, Jiang Yi quickly explained to Mo Fan. Unfortunately, Mo Fan failed to listen to a single word. The razortail drake had almost fully awakened. On the bright side, its attention was currently attracted to the astonishing attacks between the 2 advanced magicians. Otherwise, it would easily reach Mu Ningzhu and the others with a single flap of its wings. Clenching his teeth, Mo Fan crushed the blood Sarira between his fingers. Jiang Yi, who was still in the midst of her speech, was startled by Mo Fan's action. Meanwhile, the soldiers who were hiding a fair distance away were stunned when they saw Mo Fan's action. Their eyes were completely filled with terror, as if they were about to witness the birth of a devil. As the blood Sarira broke into pieces, a layer of thick, bloody mist gradually engulfed Mo Fan's body. Jiang Yi immediately backed off. She was well aware of how terrifying the blood mist was. As the blood mist circled around Mo Fan, it seemed to be inspecting him, as if it were alive. It was deciding whether the sacrificial lamb would suit its taste, as if it was something that had just been released from Pandora's box. Suddenly, The blood mist drove into Mo Fan through his pores. Mo Fan was taken by surprise. Just as he was about to check his body, his movements stiffened. The colors of his pupils turned dark, a depth capable of containing the entire galaxy. It switched from endless darkness to a mysterious silver color, then a fiery ocean, then a wild purple flicker. Meanwhile, his hair grew longer at an insane rate, while its color turned from black to white, similar to the smooth fur of the swift star wolf. His bones emitted crackling noises as they grew. His muscles expanded rapidly. Mo Fan let out a roar as he experienced a huge pain coming from his soul. The sharp fangs of a wolf could be seen sticking out from his mouth. The blood mist had vanished. However, Jiang Yi had discovered an eerie outline around Mo Fan, followed by blood-colored lines spreading under his skin. The outline was growing at a fast pace, similar to a newborn infant. Gradually, the image looming over Mo Fan's body finally resembled something. It was the evil-looking, savage silhouette of a werewolf. The swift star wolf. His blood was indeed under the influence of his summoned beast. A summoner who has established a strong bond with their summoned beast would be able to control their mind and soul better, and they will be granted extra power due to their mutated blood. Jiang Yi blurted out in excitement after taking a closer look at the soul shadow. The number of bloody lines continued to increase. They were joining together to form a pattern similar to what the swift star wolf had on his body. However, the power of the lineage they contained had significantly surpassed that of the swift star wolf. A beastly roar burst out from Mo Fan's mouth. Although he still retained his human appearance despite the bloodlines that had overrun his body, the aura emanating from his body was way more terrifying than a demon beast. His inhuman eyes and the long white hair that had reached his ankles thoroughly showcased his fiendish nature. His bare feet stepped heavily on the ground, leaving a trail of scorched footprints. The path he walked upon was instantly turned into a burning hell. His entire body was surrounded by flickering electrical chains tied to his body, actually forming a destructive domain. The soul shadow of a werewolf loomed over his back, showcasing the power and darkness he had full control of. Humans always had a tendency to imagine something that had never existed. They would combine the things they knew to invent something new, and if the thing they had invented was evil, they would call it a devil. The demon element was unacceptable by the masses, but it had limitless potential at the same time. Currently, 4 different elements had been combined together in a perfect balance in Mo Fan's body. He was the true depiction of a demon that had existed in the ancient drawings. Chapter N. Versatile Mage. Chapter 320. Spit it out. More than 1,000 test subjects were involved in the demon element experiment. However, Jiang Yi had never seen any of them react the same way Mo Fan was now. Normally, the transformation would contort their appearance beyond recognition. Even their bones would be twisted by mutation. One time, a test subject even had bones like blades poking out from the flesh all over his body, completely resembling the appearance of a demon beast. In comparison, the young man before her had retained most of his appearance. That being said, his transformation was way more terrifying than the twisted looks of the other test subjects. The demonized young man suddenly turned around. His eyes with rapidly changing colors were staring at Jiang Yi. Jiang Yi stiffened. She could not even move her fingers. She was utterly clueless why she would be overwhelmed with fear and not dare to have the thought of resisting. I forgot to mention, the demonized young man spoke in human tongue, just that his tone was accompanied by a hint of savagery. Jiang Yi could not believe what she had just heard. It was the first time a demonized magician had spoken normally. The transformation was basically the same as humans who had been possessed by parasitic beasts, which would turn them into demon beasts. Forgot to mention what? Jiang Yi looked at the young man who was so much more extraordinary than the other test subjects. It was like he had turned into a different person due to his demonic appearance. What is he trying to say? And what did he forget to tell me? I don't have just 3 elements. Mo Fan's voice was filled with a hint of a sneer, even though he was not actually sneering. She could hear the mocking laughter echoing in her ears. Jiang Yi was stunned once again. She could not tell if the young man was still the same person as before. Don't have just 3 elements. Could it be? Jiang Yi suddenly realized something. She stared at the soul shadow that resembled a werewolf looming over Mo Fan's back with great astonishment. The shadow, where did it come from? Before Jiang Yi could answer her own question, the demonized young man stooped. He was like a human-shaped bow that was accumulating power. The ground beneath him cracked open as his body sank down slowly, implying the amount of force he was gathering. Mo Fan sprang into the air, like an arrow being fired into the sky. He disappeared from before Jiang Yi and her soldiers. Raising her eyes, she discovered that Mo Fan had landed right onto a signal tower nearby. It was over 100 meters tall. He had just jumped onto it with pure physical force. The ground cracked open like a giant spiderweb just from his feet, indicating that his body possessed greater explosive power than a demon beast. Doesn't have just 3 elements. Doesn't have just 3 elements. Jiang Yi murmured with a blank face as she looked into the sky. A magician with double innate elements was already considered the perfect candidate for their experiment, but what if the young man had 4 elements? On top of the nest, the enormous razor-tailed drake had locked its gaze onto the heavenly eagle approaching it. With a flap of its wings, the razor-tailed drake flew from the nest and lunged toward the heavenly eagle carrying the giant net. It opened its large mouth, yawning open like a giant cave, planning to swallow the heavenly eagle and the humans in the net with a single bite. It was only treating them as a snack before going back to sleep. It was planning to swallow them and digest them without chewing. The saliva in its oral cavity was exceedingly sticky. Bai Tingting, Zhao Manting, Mu Nujiao, and Mu Ningzu were swallowed right into its mouth. It was just big enough to contain them. If the razor-tailed drake were using its teeth instead, they would be turned into minced meat instantly. They would soon slide down its tongue into its esophagus. The compression of its stomach wall and the corrosiveness of its gastric acids would result in a horrid death for the students. Bai Tingting and Mu Nujiao had already shut their eyes. To be fair, even if their eyes were opened, they would see nothing but darkness too. Filthy lizard, spit it out now. A savage roar shook the place, like a blasting clap of thunder in the clear sky. A figure encapsulated within a wolf-like shadow on top of a signal tower launched himself toward the enormous beast. His fist generated an incredible friction with the air, the fire engulfing it combusting fiercely. As the figure approached the razor-tailed drake, a significantly enlarged fiery fist was thrown right at the razor-tailed drake's neck. The razor-tailed drake, caught in the midst of enjoying its snack, fell backward as its neck received the powerful blow. It automatically spat out the food it was just about to swallow before its enormous body flew backward and slammed heavily into a hole on the nest. The burning flames were like a fiery cloud half dragging Mo Fan into the air. Mo Fan glared at the hole on the nest which the razor-tailed drake had disappeared into, as if he had yet to release all his anger. He raised his leg and kicked down in an arc, firing off a crescent shockwave. The shockwave swept across the sky at an insane speed, aiming right at the razor-tailed drake. The shockwave was sharp like a powerful slash. It swept past the nest silently and disappeared. The tip of the nest began to slide downward, revealing a clean cut across its surface. The cone-shaped stony structure dropped from a height of over 300 meters and slid into the ground in the middle of the city. Jiang Yi and the soldiers had eyes wide, their jaws dropped. Did he just knock back the commander-level razor-tailed drake flying with a single punch? Did he just fire a crescent-shaped projectile with his leg and cut off the top of the razor-tailed drake's nest open? Even with the transformation from the blood Sarira, there was no way he would be granted such terrifying power. 4 elements. He's a magician with 4 elements. A huge wave rose in Jiang Yi's heart. She finally knew why the demonized Mo Fan could still speak, and why he possessed greater power than the rest of the test subjects. The power granted by the blood Sarira was directly proportional to the energy it had drawn from the magician. Since the kid had 4 elements, he would be more than 4 times stronger after the transformation. He had demonized perfectly. Only an intermediate magician with 4 elements would be able to transform perfectly. His consciousness. That's right, he was able to retain his self-awareness too. Otherwise, a demonized magician would only have a strong lust to kill, just like a demon beast. Unlike the test subjects in the past, he was aware of what he wanted to do. He still had control of his mind. It worked. Their demon element was a success. Their demon element was finally a success. Jiang Yi knew she could not escape the punishment of her wrongdoing. However, she was relieved that she could witness the true strength of the demon element with her own eyes. No, what she had just seen was merely the tip of the iceberg of the demon element. He had the power of a demon with 4 elements. Chapter end. Please guys like, comment, share, and subscribe.